Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Platinum Rush. Today we'll be looking at the ups and downs I had to go through while getting the Platinum Trophy for Resident Evil 8 Village. In this video we'll talk about the 3 main elements that influenced my journey to the Platinum Trophy. The difficulty you'll have to deal with while trying to get all the trophies, the amount of time you need to realistically spend before you unlock the last trophy, and last but not least, how enjoyable was it for me to get that Platinum Trophy in Resident Evil 8. Is it a complete grind that makes you hate every minute you spend on it, or is it actually a fun time you'll be spending while making those achievements pop up? Stay tuned for tips, tricks and advice that personally helped me and I'm gladly gonna share with you guys, and let's jump right into the game.
Ethan Winters.
Ethan Winters. Mr. Winters.
Ethan Winters. Ethan. Poor Ethan.
Ethan Winters. Welcome.
Resident Evil 8 comes with 3 difficulty modes: casual, normal and hardcore. Beating the game on any of those will then unlock the Village of Shadows, the hardest difficulty. I'd recommend you to go for normal difficulty on your first playthrough. If you do follow my advice and choose that difficulty, you'll be faced with an overall pretty mild challenge. While the game may seem really crazy for the first 30 minutes, where you'll have your first encounter with the Lycans and need to survive a certain amount of time, it really softens up right after that first bit and will get drastically easier from then on. You eventually go to the Castle Dimitrescu, and while the whole internet somehow has the collective wish to get stepped on and tortured by a giant middle-aged lady with a pretty creepy face, she actually doesn't pose nearly the same threat as similar enemies did in the other Resident Evil games. Looking at Mr. X in the Resident Evil 2 remake, I remember how I sometimes rolled my eyes and was completely annoyed because he had found me yet again and posed an obstacle that there was just no way around. Meanwhile, Lady Dimitrescu lets you literally squeeze by without apprehending you, unless it's after she insults you for being a man and sliding her claws out. She's literally harmless enough to justify a mod like this.
You disgusting outsider!
The rest of the game continues this level of difficulty, with the only exception being the stronghold you go to in the last few bits of Resident Evil 8. Once you've beaten your first playthrough, you unlock the Village of Shadows difficulty, and right along with it, you get the option to use points you get for finishing various challenges, to buy infinite ammo for weapons. Before you go straight for the hardest difficulty now, I tell you to instead do the knife only speedrun with the Karambit knife on a New Game Plus casual difficulty. The very easygoing nature of this game shows itself once more here, since you can combine the speedrun with the knife only run. You can do all of this with more than enough time to spare. In my case it took me roughly 2 hours and 30 minutes. Now that you've beaten the game twice and unlocked even more challenge points which you can spend for getting whatever weapon and unlimited ammo you want, it's time to tackle the Village of Shadows difficulty. If you're sadistic enough to play the Village of Shadows difficulty without any of those cheats, you're going to have a very hard time, but realistically only a small percentage of all the players who want the Platinum Trophy will do that. The only thing that really changes in the Village of Shadow difficulty compared to normal is that you can take just 2 hits before you die, the enemies are tankier than before, and bosses sometimes spawn additional enemies to make it harder to take them down. I started my playthrough without unlimited ammo and insane weapons, and would get them later on. And even in the village section where you just have to survive for a few minutes with mediocre weapons in such a high difficulty, it was more than manageable once I found a good strategy. In my case that strategy was shoving an obstacle in front of the door in this building, and then just keeping the Lycans from breaking it. No one should spawn behind you, and you're completely fine for the few minutes you gotta survive before this segment ends. Even the final boss on the hardest difficulty will be very easy to beat once you go in there with overpowered weapons like the stake and unlimited ammo. So trust me when I tell you, you'll be just fine, even on the hardest possible difficulty. For the miscellaneous trophies like fast reflexes, go to this spot right in front of the stronghold and try swinging your knife until you hit one of the arrows. And for the lucky number trophy, make sure you can craft rifle ammo. Then keep buying stuff the Duke offers you until you hit a number close to 700 and keep selling the bullets, which should get you 7 coins each. The last trophy, which could turn out to be kinda tricky, is Mathematician. To ensure that you explored every corner of the map, just double check that there's no grey spots left. Note that this does not mean that every building you can enter has to be blue. It rather just means that there can't be spots like these left. Also make sure you take the boat after you lower the bridge here to both directions. If you keep all this in mind, the trophy is guaranteed to pop up. So, now that you feel pretty confident about being able to take on the hardest challenges this game has to offer, and I've lured you into a false sense of security, let's talk about the one factor that spices everything up by a major degree: Mercenaries. In Mercenaries, you play through various little sections of the main areas of the game. You're on a timer, which gets extended by killing monsters. You choose your own loadout with the money given to you and can find blue orbs that hold randomly chosen upgrades for Ethan. I think everyone that got the platinum for Resident Evil 8 can agree on the fact that this mode is where the true and only real difficulty lies. There's a total of 8 levels you need to get an S rank on to pass. Now, the first 4 levels are completely doable, but the latter 4 are hardcore versions of those, meaning you go down after 2 hits. Enemies are way bulkier, and all you get to choose from are the grenade launcher, the magnum, and a basic pistol. Now there are a lot of tips I could give you on how to beat Mercenaries. So many in fact that I'll release a video parallel to this one where you're gonna find 8 tips from Mercenaries mode, since it would take up too much time in this video. To keep it very basic in general, here are some of the most essential tips. The most important advice I can give you is this: keep the combo going. A high combo is the most important factor if you want to hit the necessary score for the S rank. If you have the choice between an upgrade or rushing to the end of the level first and getting it after you killed all the enemies, do so. If keeping the combo up means using a precious shot out of your magnum on a regular enemy, do so. Nothing, really absolutely nothing beats the urgency of keeping the combo counter up. To give you an example, if you manage your resources in the best way possible, do your absolute best to not waste any extra bullet or only use your strong weapons on the bosses you meet, you will probably survive longer and get further in the level, but have multiple smaller combos rather than just one long chain of uninterrupted kills. While this might sound like a perfect approach on paper, it's not the one you should focus on in reality. Why? Because it doesn't even matter if you die before finishing all the stages. I got a triple S rank on Castle 2, even though I died at stage 3 out of 4. I never got to see the final boss of this level and didn't even make it to the hardest part. Meaning I just never had to deal with the peak difficulty of this area because I kept the chain of combos going for so long that it simply didn't matter if I finished it or not. I had so many points by then that I got the triple S anyway. Mercenary values combos more than anything else, so play according to that. Another thing which plays right into the last advice: keep enemies on low health and make them serve as links between areas when there's no other enemies. To show you what I'm talking about, let's look at the Mad Village level. Between the first area on the right here and the long distance walk to the next section here, there's not a single enemy. Assume the worst case and say you killed the last enemy back here. It's very likely you'll lose the combo while on your way to the next area. To avoid that and even squeeze in some extra looting, walk down the road as much as you possibly can and shoot that bird, which will up your combo and refresh it at the same time. You can now easily walk to the next area without losing your combo or making a mistake, which then would cause you to take a lot of damage or even die. I'll leave it at these 2 tips since I think they're the most important ones. If you need more, then please don't shy away from checking out the video right here where I'll share 8 of them to further help you with Mercenaries. In conclusion, the base game of Resident Evil 8 and the trophies that are connected with it are very easy. The whole difficulty lies within the Mercenaries mode. Difficulty wise, base game Resident Evil is much easier than base game Resident Evil 7, but Mercenaries cranks it up to a 7.5 out of 10. You might have heard it before, but Resident Evil 8 is a short game. It took me roughly 41 hours to beat the game. That includes my first blind playthrough on Twitch that took 10 hours, another additional playthrough just above 5 hours where I did all the collectibles on casual, then another playthrough on casual where I did the speedrun, and lastly the Village of Shadowrun. So 4 entire playthroughs, 2 of them where I really took my time and 2 of them where I tried to get through the game as fast as possible. Keep in mind that with 4 playthroughs and the additional time it took me to get Mercenaries done, I still got the platinum in just 41 hours. Time in this game is therefore not an issue at all. Remember that I did additional steps that you won't have to do and didn't use a guide right off the bat. If you choose to do that, you can remove another 4 to 5 hours and will probably get the platinum then within 30 to 35 hours. Collectibles and miscellaneous trophies you need to get can all be picked up on the way and don't require an additional playthrough. And even though Mercenaries is skill dependent, it shouldn't extend your time investment by too much. Therefore, time-wise, Resident Evil 8 is a very fast platinum to achieve. Resident Evil 8 is openly admitting that it took inspiration from Resident Evil 4. Some people give it a hard time because of that. I mean, sure, the inventory is basically the same. The merchant being your only real help during the game and selling you weapons and upgrades for those weapons is basically the same too. The fact that there is a huge fight in the village at the beginning of the game is basically the same. The goddamn final boss is basically the same. But hey, at least I didn't go all the way and copy that stupid silly boss in the lake. I mean, imagine they put Del Lago in a newer Resident Evil game. Who could take that serious? Come on! I personally absolutely love Resident Evil 4, have played it on like 4 different systems and beaten it over 20 times by now, and I still cannot get over how fantastic that game is. But even to me it seemed like Village kind of overdid it when it took inspiration and guidance from Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 7 provided this amazing foundation for Resident Evil, trying to take it back to a spookier, more horror-focused atmosphere, and laying a great foundation there. It seemed like it would redeem the series from the nightmare that Resident Evil 6 was to many of the fans, and I think Part 7 did a genuinely amazing job and succeeded in doing that. I remember how uncomfortable it felt facing Mia on hardcore difficulty because besides being hard as fuck to beat, it was actually just really a scary fight. The fact that Ethan Winters was just an average dude back then, and the controls of the game being purposely slow and clunky at times to underline that, made the game truly uncomfortable. And that was exactly why so many people absolutely loved Resident Evil 7, and it got overall very high praise from the fanbase and critics alike. Jack's presence, while he chases you, caused me to be under constant pressure, and especially in direct comparison to Dimitrescu, you can see how much more of a threat Jack actually posed. Overall, Resident Evil Village is like this weird little snowflake in the family that has this really cool older brother which the whole family absolutely loves. But Village thinks to himself, no, screw that, I'm gonna be like great grandpa and show them all. So it becomes this very weird hybrid between the first person controls, which were meant for the scarier approach that Resident Evil 7 took, and meanwhile still takes inspiration from the very first game in Resident Evil, which was the start of the more action orientated approach. Resident Evil Village therefore suffers a bit to that disconnect between the original purpose of the first person perspective and the much more action oriented approach it tries. You notice this the most during sections where you need precise aim to hit dashing enemies and just can't seem to get it right. Despite me personally liking the Resident Evil games where you have the over the shoulder perspective much more than the newer approach Resident Evil 7 and 8 took, it feels like Resident Evil Village drifted right back into this weird personality crisis the game tried to escape with the much more horror focused approach of the prequel. Just imagine for a second if Resident Evil Village kept a very horror focused approach. Ethan is still this clumsy everyday guy we met in Resident Evil 7, with Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters posing a much bigger threat, the village being less of an open and more narrow space, the majority of the game playing in the night, and Miranda, the final boss of the game, actually being extremely hard and tedious to take down while also being scary. To amplify everything I just said, just try to also reimagine the part where you take control of Chris for the first time ever. Imagine going from clumsy Ethan to badass military trained Chris Redfield, who has been through more zombie outbreaks than Ethan has fingers left at this point, to finally escape that complete and uncomfortable sense of dread and terror that has accompanied you for 3/4 of the game so far, and finally feel like you are in control and can deal with these Lycans, together with this incredibly badass soundtrack playing while you gun everything down. I guarantee you, this part of the game would have hit so much harder and felt so much more satisfying if they just took a more horror focused approach for the rest of the game. Now, don't get me wrong, despite all the criticism I just voiced, the game is very enjoyable in the state it got released. It's consistently interesting and just very fun to shoot down Lycans. The enemy designs are much more creative than they were in Resident Evil 7, the bosses are fun, and I can honestly say that during my first playthrough I was very interested in the story. Had a blast with all the different weapons and areas in the game, and just really wanted to see how Ethan's tale ends. Another thing I need to mention is how fucking amazing everything was that had to do with sound. Capcom is amazing at making things sound crisp and clean, and has some of the best OSTs I've ever seen. It's funny that I talked about the same thing in my Resident Evil 2 video, and I just have to say it again. Capcom really knows how to use music to make the players feel certain things. A huge reason why the Duke is such an interesting character is this mysterious aura he gives off, and the soundtrack that plays when you meet him is just perfect to establish this atmosphere further. In a similar fashion, the OST that plays when you take control of Chris and kill Lycans left and right makes you feel like an absolute badass and somehow further helps you understand that you really are in control and that you're not locked in the village with the monsters, but the monsters are locked in here with you. Resident Evil Village has many amazing parts about it and was a feast for people that are interested in the general lore of Resident Evil. So despite the criticism, all in all the game still has a lot of amazing qualities to offer, and I guarantee you're gonna enjoy your time while playing it. Resident Evil Village is the first prequel to the very spooky and dark Resident Evil 7, and therein lies the problem. It already takes the series in a much more action-focused direction again. What this means for you as a platinum or achievement hunter is that the base game is very much easier. Enemies don't pose nearly the same threat as they did in the prequel, there's only a few spots that will give you any trouble at all, and no matter which difficulty you play on, there are more than enough options to figure out a way around those spikes in difficulty. The collectibles sometimes basically almost lie in your path, and even challenges like the knife only run and the speedrun are done without breaking a sweat on New Game Plus. The only hard thing that you might encounter is Mercenaries mode, which you will absolutely figure out if you're dedicated enough. Watch some guides, like my video, and keep certain strategies in the back of your head while doing so. Resident Evil 8 is an enjoyable but rather short platinum trophy that should be picked up by any fan of the series and even an interested newcomer. Therefore, go rush that platinum. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I sincerely hope I could help you out with some of the trophies. Remember that there's another video I uploaded at the same time as this one to help you out with the Mercenaries mode, and be sure to drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to find similar content, and come visit me on Twitch TV/richfkh. I'm live every Wednesday to Saturday night, and I would love to see you guys there. Until next time!